All right, well, welcome to Soul Forum this week. I am trying to broadcast this from my home, so a little bit different, but it gives me the opportunity to kind of arrive in different locations and do this conversation with you. So I'm delighted to be here hanging out at home today. Obviously, we would love for you to pay attention to this video prior to coming to Soul Forum Live, but if you're just catching this at any old time, we hope that it continues to build on the conversation that we've been having, both in our reflection time and in the ongoing conversations we're having with the community around these issues, either via Zoom, which is happening on Tuesday nights at 5 o'clock if you're interested, or at Soul Forum Live, which happens each Sunday at 8:30 in the morning, 8:30 in the morning on Sundays. I wanted to start today by just saying kind of how humbled I am, and and I mean that in a way that, like, I can feel something almost like deeply stirring as I've been processing the conversations that have been showing up both in our kind of Zoom conversation and the live conversation. And this last week, as we were exploring the idea of what does it feel like to think about a spirituality that is grounded in your experience of, the real world, the world that holds you, the natural world, the interrelationship, the interdependencies of the landscape that holds you, the vibrancy of Earth and all of its systems that sustain us. As we were having a conversation about how do we imagine a kind of a spirituality or a soul's journey within that context, one of the people in the group brought up the question, well, what is spirituality anyway? What is this thing that we're all kind of trying to pay attention to? And it really sparked, I think, some wonderful conversation that really this week has really kind of rattled me a little bit in thinking, is it possible that all we really need, even though we've designed these sort of religious constructs that we've grown up with and inherited, is it possible that really the primary and maybe the soul landscape on which your soul's journey can evolve is literally in relationship to the real world that holds us all? Not some abstract notion of world that we've collectively constructed, but rather the actual experience of life that we're having right now. And how do we craft a conversation, a soul-filled conversation in and out from that kind of interaction? It's really a great question. One of the things that that came out of that conversation was Karen, who's been involved quite deeply in this sort of acceptance of what she understands to be climate collapse, that we're in this place now where we've caused so much turmoil to our ecosystem that it is collapsing in many ways, and there's an inevitability to that collapse. And so there are those who are trying to work on trying to, just not deny that, but wake up to the reality of it and live into it in a healthy way. Karen turned me on this last week, and I can share this video as well, to Michael Dowd, who is a clergy person that has shifted his notion of the very nature of the divine to what he calls God Earth emoji, God as G Earth emoji D. Is that a curious way of thinking about it? G Earth emoji D. That we need to put the earth and these ecosystems back into this primary place that has been held for us by this idea that we've grown up with of God, that we're creating again, imagining, holding this primary relationship as ultimate, and not replacing that primary relationship with some abstract notion of God that we have to argue about whether that God is real or not, or how that God works, when we actually live inside this all embracing life force that holds us all, that should be our central focus. It is, I think, and holds some promise for what religion can be for today and into the future. I think there's something deeply powerful about that. It is the thing that binds the whole human experience together. It is how we are all kin together and in kinship with the natural world around us. So when asked, what are the primary, characteristics of a spirituality within that context, Michael Dowd says three things. It's any life ways that fosters and supports ecological integrity. So that's primary, right? All of the life ways that you engage in should be fostering, nurturing, in a reciprocal relationship inside of the capacity to create ecological integrity. So that's number one. Number two is that which builds social coherence, that which binds the fabric of our society together. And the third is that which fosters personal wholeness. And I've been ruminating, if you can ruminate, over those three since I heard them. And if you think about it, that's a powerful matrix out of which to construct a very well-rounded and grounded spiritual experience. And last week, we were all kind of exploring together, what does it mean to have this sort of soulful relationship with some aspect of the planet or the environment, and where is that for you? And everybody had places, experiences in the fabric of the world in which we live, these moments that kind of invite them into some greater sense of themselves, awareness of where they fit into the cosmos, this sense of being grounded, connected, nourished within that relationship. And so I just wanted to encourage those of you who were in that conversation over the last couple of weeks to maybe start thinking about what might it feel like for you. We're each on our own spiritual path. We each have different ways of manifesting soul, I think. But, what if the foundational piece for that just simply lived on the plane of the very reality that holds us now? And what would that feel like to you? So you're not trying to necessarily construct something abstract, but listen to the very rhythms of the experience of life that you're having right now in your own kind of landscape, where life holds you. And in that, nurturing ecological integrity, social coherence, and your own personal wholeness. It just seems like a super vibrant journey to me. So thanks for that conversation. It's still brewing in my own mind, and it even suggests to me a recommendation of the possibility of, as congregations struggle to figure out, how do they manifest their own call to be spiritual centers within community, that possibly shifting to that way of being in community might hold some promise. It doesn't have to be, not everybody has to do it, but I think there should be some communities that are doing that sort of thing. So an amazing thing. In the midst of that conversation that we had, the other thing that came up was this notion of how do we find language to articulate and shape this experience. And there's a wonderful quote that came up inside of the conversation we had. I don't think I have it with me now, but the quote was basically something like this: that the limits of our language, the language that we use to articulate experience, try to describe the feelings that we're having in relationship to the world in which we live, whatever they happen to be, that the language that we use can either limit or expand our experience of that reality. Right? It's just the way our minds work. And I want to talk a little bit about that today, as well as how do we kind of wake up our our capacity for renewed language around this theme that we're discussing today. Thomas Berry, great person who has an eco-theological kind of point of view, wrote this: "We are talking only to ourselves," Thomas Berry says. "We are talking only to ourselves. We are not talking to the rivers. We are not listening to the wind or the climate. And most of the disastrous consequences we are facing are born out of that spiritual deficit." Imagine if the soulful conversation you were having was not just between us, but was also a way of both conversing, listening, and hearing, being in sort of cosmic kinship, like a conversation that's birthed in this sort of cosmic kinship, that you're listening to trees and birds and the small creatures that wander around in your backyard, or the way the wind is moving, or the earth is giving expression to itself. Imagine what would shift in your language set, and how it would open up greater connectivity and awareness if you were able to tap into that. Finding new language is oftentimes, I think, sort of the entryway to heightened awareness. And if you think about some of the major religious movements, often it feels almost like they're a language event, right? If I think about the way in which the Hebrew people took their story, their history, and created a mythic story out of it in the Hebrew scriptures that many people pay attention to today, right? They elevated their story into a mythic story. And when they did that, they created almost poetic, metaphoric language to enrich their shared history. So the language they brought, the imagination they brought to their experience of their history, is the explosion of their religious expression. At least that's how I would maybe imagine it. See how that works for you. Same with Jesus, right? If you think about Jesus in his context, used completely different kind of language set to articulate what he saw as the kingdom of God. Right? He used parables and stories that were grounded in the everyday practices of people and experiences of people. He elevated out from the experience of life he was having a creative language, a narrative that began to spark the imagination and set people on a different path. It's in some ways you can see that language can sometimes function as kind of oppressive, if you're sort of stuck in a language that's kind of shaping your reality, or it can be liberating. It can start to move you into new frontier. And I think many religious systems are about that, right? About opening up the language. Even in Buddhism, right? The Buddhist koan is a language event that explodes your notion of reality, your notion of self, your notion of world, your notion of other. That's what's happening there. So when we gather together, whether we do it live on Sunday morning that's coming up, or on the Zoom time, I want to talk about both of those. Sort of, where are you at in your sense of what is your sort of grounding place in your own spiritual awareness? And is it possible that you could just simply live with this life ways that are grounded to the very earth itself? So that's number one, is sort of where you're at with that. And then two, how do we maybe take another step in exploring language? And let me just make a note, this other note about language. I think, and I've heard this over and over again, and I saw it again in our conversation this last week, language, it's almost like sometimes you can't find the words for what you're experiencing. One woman in the group talked about her experience with trees, and rather than using a whole lot of language, she basically, kind of held on to her own body at a certain place, right? And there was something about the way in which a relationship with trees linked to her in that body space. And she didn't have a huge language set to describe it. But I think if you live inside of the experience long enough, in the awareness of the experience, and then at some point, the language that's happening underneath, below your head, it's in your body, that language might be able to find expression in words so that you can share and construct your sense of your relationship with that in a way that can have effect on other people, can expand your own awareness and the awareness of others as well. So how do we look for words beyond the words we currently have? And what might that feel like and look like? So I want to explore that a little bit with you if you show up live on Sunday or on Zoom as well. Let me close with a piece by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Robin wrote the book Braiding Sweetgrass. She's a scholar and an educator and I would say a philosopher and an environmentalist. I mean, she's a lot of things, right? And that's a great book, Braiding Sweetgrass. And there's this quote by Robin that I think provides us all with a little bit of hope as to what this path, this life way might look like. This manifestation of what Michael Dowd calls this capacity to seek greater ecological integrity, social coherence, and personal wholeness. What would going down that path look like? And she writes this: action on behalf of life transforms. Isn't that a beautiful line? She's got more, but that in and of itself is an amazing line. Action on behalf of life transforms. Because relationships between self and the world are reciprocal. It's not a question of first getting enlightened or saved and then acting, but rather as we work to heal the earth heals us. Do you get that sense of what she's inviting us into? It's almost like simply going on the adventure. What is spirituality? Could it be that it's just going on the adventure to being a participant in the healing capacity around ecological sustainability, social coherence, and personal wholeness? Taking that path, as you move into that with some sense of longing for and generating kind of healing within that, it heals you. It's reciprocal. And so it's not as if we're trying to figure something out and then import it. We're just participating as co-participants in this capacity, this healing capacity of the earth and of social relationships and of personal wholeness. They will all co-regulate, reciprocate as we take this journey. In many ways, that gives me hope for the conversation we're having at Soul Forum. That while I don't know where this is going, and maybe you don't either, I get nervous that I don't have all the answers. You don't have the answers either. I get a little lost in my own soul when I stumble and can't find words or the way that I want to go next. All that kind of stuff can feel overwhelming. But if there is, in fact, baked into the very reality that sustains us, this reciprocity, then the journey itself is the pathway to wholeness, right? So let's go on that journey together. All right. Well, I hope this content was, a little bit helpful today. And I'm looking forward to the conversation that it generates this Sunday if you come together with us at 8:30, or if you want to join us on Tuesday night at 5 for our Zoom conversation, either one. We want to do a little bit more diving into both these areas of focus. You know, what might it look like to put your sense of God into the context of Michael Dowd's notion, G, earth emoji, D. Let's get earth back in the center of this thing. And then second, you know, where might you explore a vibrant language set that facilitates or expresses the kind of healing that's happening as you take this journey deeper into your own soul's adventure. All right. Thanks for being a part of this. We'll see y'all next week.